Thank you. Just wait for the gallery to be seated. I assume the best way to go about this would just be going into discussions first before we even look at moving a change to this recommendation. Thank you, everyone. All right, so 3.1 Daintree River Ferry options, May 21. The recommendation that Council 1 purchases the current Daintree River Ferry for the agreed amount as per confidential report provided to councillors. 2, delegates authority under Section 257 of the Local Government Act 2009 to the Chief Executive Officer to determine and finalise all matters associated with the purchase of the ferry and associated key infrastructure components. Now, I'm happy to move that one to start with. There's a seconder, Councillor Scomerton. So we have it onto the floor. Procedurally, is it best to choose to discussions first, I'm guessing, before we make an option decision?
Sure.
We'll do that. We'll just have discussions first, and then we can decide on an option, but the two. I'd like to start by saying that I'm disappointed about the proposal in front of us, and would much rather be preferable to able to say that we've found a perfect solution, but I can't. All I can say is that I believe the staff have recommended the best option from a list of choices, and as we are still in confidential negotiations with the contractor, further details cannot be expanded at this point. I believe that the staff have tried to give as much of an explanation as possible in this report, and I'd like to assure the community that when negotiations are completed, in the interest of transparency, further details will be forthcoming. It saddens me that what is the end result has come to, and in many ways I must wonder how much the consistent negative political backlash from a loud minority group has played into this result. This council, its staff and us councillors consistently follow the laws that control what we can do and how we can do it. We have consistently supported the community in attempting to protect its best interests in all of the decisions that we've been making. That may be different to what a contractor may have wanted, but that is where negotiations can take part. And if there's goodwill and good faith exists between the two parties, a compromise can be the norm and it can be obtained, something that has unfortunately failed with the negotiations between council and this contractor. I know that my decisions around this have always been about good governance, getting the market value for our ratepayers and ensuring the best possible service outcomes for the users. I will continue to support a ferry service as declared after the consultation, and I will continue to direct this council in the best of its ability to progress for a two-ferry system. Unfortunately for now, though, it does appear that the relationship between council and the current contractor is no longer in a space that will be able to continue, and I believe that it is in the best interest of the ratepayers to support the staff's decision and purchase the Daintree ferry for the proposed amount. It is the only option available to this council that will guarantee that a full service will continue without interruption from July 1. And I believe in the long term, it will put this council in a much better position to be able to negotiate ferry contracts moving forward with owning the actual asset itself. Would anyone like to speak against the motion?
Yes, I will.
Councillor Nolly?
Thank you. So let us be very clear about what is happening here today. This is not a great outcome for the Shire. It's a last bid, I suppose, to make sure there's a way to cross the Daintree ferry, the Daintree River from the 1st of July onwards. And also, be very clear from where and how this all started. It started in April last year, over a year ago, from a Merrill Minute. A Merrill Minute that contained no cost-benefit analysis, no risk management, no backup plans, no thought process as to what could occur. Everything that a proper report would have contained. In July of this year, we should have before us a two-ferry solution. One of them solar to cross the Daintree. The public should be very aware that this is not what is happening here today. We would have had a ferry that would have been bringing in revenue, two ferries that would have been bringing in revenue in this cashed up tourist market at the moment. So why is this happening? I'm going to summarise from a councillor who's been here from the beginning of New Douglas. In 2018, a community consultation was held with the goal of soliciting ideas as to how the ferry service might be improved, with the preferred option clearly being a dual ferry service. Based on this consultation, a tender for improved service was released in 2019. The tender had an open scope and asked the market how best to improve the wait times experienced with the current arrangement due peak times. Council received tenders from 4 companies, and at the ordinary council meeting in December 3, 2019, Siren was announced as preferred tenderer. Now remember, in any tender document package, generally it's common that a contract is included and submitted with the final documents. So the December 2019 meeting, when councils awarded the tender, it was under the recommendation from the report from the staff. So you can imagine my surprise to hear of the mayoral minute of April 2020 when I walked back into council after being re-elected for my 3rd term. So why am I talking about the solar ferry? Because it's all rolled together. The tender was to provide 2 ferries as a solution to cross the Daintree, using the existing ferry and adding a solar one. The tender was won by the contractors who, by owning the existing ferry, probably for obvious reasons, would be able to provide a great solution. That's important because it's a confusing aspect for the public. As I said, this is just going to get us across the river on the 1st of July. It doesn't involve the new, bigger solar ferry. So we could have had the opportunity to sign it anywhere from the end of December 2019, anywhere in anywhere in 2020 until the mayoral minute. We also had a solution presented to us in January of 2021 this year in a closed meeting where if the recommendation of Councillor Zemettara and myself had been followed, we wouldn't be sitting here today. We had another opportunity in May of this year, once again in a closed meeting, whereas Councillor Zemettara and myself, we had been listened to, we wouldn't be sitting here today. So I've demonstrated that over a year and a bit, there have been numerous formal occasions that would have resulted, in my opinion, a better option than what we are facing today. So I'm not at all happy with what has, not with the recommendation, but what has led us to this recommendation.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak in the affirmative, please? For the motion?
For the motion?
Yeah,
sure. Thanks.
Councillor McEwen?
Yep. All right, we've found ourselves in a precarious position here. It is essential that we guarantee the supply of access across the Daintree River. This contract is the 2nd largest contract the Douglas Shire have. This has not been an easy process, and this is evident from the number of discussions, workshop, and special meetings we've conducted over the last 12 months. In relation to the negotiations, I believe we have been very fair and reasonable with what we have offered, but this is not the opinion of everyone involved. We have to be financially sensible with the Shire and rates money, and sorry, but I do not believe that what we were offered was acceptable. While we may be paying an inflated price, it is essential to ensure we are not put in this position again in the future and take ownership of this important piece of infrastructure to ensure the continued service. I've been in contact with some past councillors who have been involved previously with ferry dealings, and most of them have agreed that it should have been in council control many years ago. There is a business case to show that having control of the ferry and not paying exorbitant fees and commissions make commercial sense. However, we must plan for the future events and take into account events like the ultimate repayment and surveys and repairs and maintenance along the way. It's sort of like a short-term pain for a long-term gain, and that's where I sit and I support the purchase.
Thank you, Councillor McEwen. I wish to speak against the motion. Councillor Zemettara.
Thank you, through you, Mayor Kerr. We're sitting here today because 3rd December 2019, Council resolved to award a 2 ferry contract to Siren Enterprises. This was after a public consultation that overwhelmingly was in support of a 2 ferry solution. It eased obviously the waiting time for the peak season. And then unbeknown to me, this contract was never finalised. I found that out after the 2020 election. And if we jump ahead to April 2020, there was a mayoral minute put forward that this contract would not advance until council went back to public consultation as to whether a bridge or a ferry was the preferred option. And yet again, the predictable outcome was that the two ferry solution was the preferred option, not a bridge. And this consultation process dragged on till December 2020. I've never had before this had heard any complaints about Siren Enterprises' ability to run this ferry in a professional manner, and that was the only, and they were prepared to do that in the same vein once a new contract was awarded. But apparently, I found out also something. I found out that on April 30th, the contract for the two ferry solution had expired. Something I wasn't aware of. And if it wasn't for the mayoral minute, we could quite possibly be going across two ferries on the 1st of July this year. But as it stands now, there's no, we're not sure if there's going to be a ferry operating on the 1st of July. We don't have a clue about that. And there are options offered by Siren in January that should have been accepted, options that would not have had the financial impacts on ratepayers that we're being asked to choose today. Options that would have ensured a ferry would definitely be operating on the 1st of July. I mean, this should never have been allowed to get to this stage. It should have been settled in December 2019. The public are asking me constantly, people in the public are asking me, well, how much does this cost us? How much does this cost ratepayers? And not just how much is it going to cost now to buy it because of what's happened. How much is this, since from mayoral minute to now, how much does it cost ratepayers? How much is the consultation, the legal fees, staff's time, the CEO's time? They're questions that need to be answered. They're going to be made public is what I'm asking. Is that going to be made public on what it costs to be into ratepayers of the Shire? I think there's only one option on the table today that can ensure that we have a ferry in the water on the 1st of July. And I don't see that we should have a financial burden on the ratepayers of the Shire.
Is that all, Councillor Zamachara?
Well, yeah, I just don't know how it got to this stage. I know we should have been settled 18 months ago. That's all, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Scomerson, you're speaking next.
Yes, thank you. Okay. I cannot stress enough how disappointed I am that we have been left with little option but to outlay such an exorbitant amount of ratepayers' money on such an essential service. Should we choose to go down another path, the potential flow and effect to the residents and the workers north of the river and the tourists that visit the Daintree would be qualified. The ferry itself has been surveyed by 2 independent companies and we have been given the market value of the ferry. Unfortunately, this is not what we were paying for. The council attempted to enter into good faith negotiations with the contractor, but has not resulted in a mutually acceptable position. As councillors, our role is to provide not only the essential services, which we can say the ferry is, but to act in the best interest and the best value for money for the ratepayers and residents. The upside of all of this is now the ferry will be a council asset, and I believe that it should be from this day forward remain a council asset so that we aren't put into this position for a third time. The council staff has worked tirelessly to ensure that this decision will have a minimal impact on the ratepayers, and I cannot applaud them enough for their efforts. I'd also like to say as well is that we were presented with a lot of options. Not a lot, we were presented with some options. And my belief is, after reading numerous pages and pages of the contract and the options that we were presented with, that we would have been in a worse financial situation than what we're going into now. We can work through what we're going through now because we'll end up with an asset. No one in this period of time has said that Siren is not a good operator or they don't provide a good service. But we have to be responsible for the value of money for the Shire and for our ratepayers. And after reading numerous documents, I cannot see any other further but to go to the option that 1B, because in the long-term effect, if we go into another contract is going to be worth a lot more than what we're going to have to pay for this asset. And I just think it needs to stop. This is a second time that this has gone through because the council does not own a vital part of infrastructure to ensure that the people and the tourists can get across north of the river. So time has come. I don't care if it's one ferry or two ferries, but let's just get one ferry so that we're responsible for the operation of that to get people to and from, because they deserve to have a form of transport. And if we can't get it from the state government, as a local government, that's our responsibility. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Scomerson. So I'll have a right of reply before we move any further. Prior to the last election, I was very clear whilst campaigning that I was not happy with the previous crossing consultation. I didn't believe that it was transparent in using the statement that there'll be no discussion of a bridge, nor did it involve all of those who'd be affected in the larger part of the Douglas Shire community. To me, transparency is to put it all on the table and let the community fairly decide on their choice. And in that more recent consultation, they did. And it clearly showed that it wasn't 1 in 20 people wanting a bridge, as stated, it was 1 in 3 people. And those members of our community absolutely deserve the opportunity to at least have their say in this debate, and that hadn't occurred. I also said that I wasn't happy about the details of the contract being locked in a closed session, and that no one in this community was allowed to know any of the financial implications that the second ferry would bring, even after negotiations were complete. Information I believe should have been prudent for the public to be aware of, as after all, it's their community and their money that we're using. I then had a great doubt in the ability to provide a hybrid solar diesel ferry as tendered, as well as concerns about the ability in gaining the permits required to run a second ferry. The community also has a right to answer about these concerns. So let me be very clear when I say that the biggest community consultation was conducted in this Shire last year, and it was called a local government election, where 55% of our community voted for me as their mayor and the agenda that I had provided. It was absolutely my elected duty to walk into this office and use the tools available to me as the elected mayor to complete the promises that I had made during that election. And whilst a minority group has criticised me for using a mayoral minute, it is a tool I can use, it was legal, and it most certainly was appropriate. It was a decision that I have no regrets in proceeding with to have finally brought this continuing ferry bridge fiasco to the forefront of this community. And as an election commitment, it would have been deceitful for me to not have completed the commitments that I'd made during the election. Once and for all, you can now actually say that everyone has had the opportunity to have a say, and on this occasion, the majority of our community chose a ferry system, regardless of the costs and even with a bridge on the table. That is honest, transparent democracy. But sadly, over the past year, that democracy has been dragged through the mud by various members of this community that clearly don't care about fairness, balanced decision-making, and more importantly, the democracy. Sadly, though, I have no doubt in my mind that the contractors involved in these negotiations have also been directly influenced and possibly affected by this constant negativity, slander, and incorrect opinion pieces that have been consistently spread about sectors of this council. And I believe that is absolutely reflected in this income. You know, we have been very clearly shown by the staff and the CEO, by solicitors' letters, that the 2 ferry contract could not be completed before the election. Okay, so to bring it up again is appalling, right? No one has ever criticised Ciron for the work that they've done in the past. This has been about negotiations between both parties, right? You know, as for the option, 2 of that, we've been advised again by solicitors that we cannot proceed with a 2 ferry contract because it has expired. To do so would put this council in extreme danger. So I repeat from what I said before, we only have one option, and that is the option to purchase this ferry. So to me, what I believe is the right thing is that we move a motion, which I will do, that purchase of the current Daintree River ferry for the agreed amount as per the confidential reports provided to the councillors, and that we add option 1B to that. If I could get a seconder for that amendment, please. Councillor Scomerson. So moved by Councillor Kerr, seconded by Councillor Scomerson. You're right. Okay. One B, that's correct. Now, the correct procedures, does that need to be debated again, or we can go straight into a vote for the amendment? Does that in which option?
You've got a mover and a seconder, so.
So
you
we'll just
can-
put it to the vote. All those in,
you
all
can-
those in favour? Councillor McEwen, Councillor Scommers and Councillor Kerr. All those against? Councillor Nolly, Councillor Zamataro. So that becomes the effective motion that we'll be on. The recommendation is to purchase the current Daintree River ferry for the agreed amount as per the confidential report provided to councillors, option 1B. I'm happy to move that. Seconder for it, Councillor Scomerson. All those in favour? Councillor McEwen, Councillor Scomerson, Councillor Kerr. All those against? Councillor Nolly, Councillor Zamataro. The motion passes. That concludes the only option that we have on today's agenda. All caught up? Thank you. And that closes the meeting today at 4:06. Thank you very much for attending.